was an awkward kid. And I was suspicious of authority. Anybody else? I was, no, really, I was a shy kid. I was very sensitive. And it took me a while to figure out how to be a human. You know, what was this all about? You're just kind of thrust into life. And I discovered that I could speak a language, the language of music. So that was the 60s. I'm going to wind past the 70s, okay, and go straight to the 80s. So I discovered that I could speak this language. And the beauty about music is it shortcuts all that social stuff. You talk straight to someone's heart. You don't have to worry. You're just a musician. I'm just going to stand here and play. And in the 80s, I did pretty well. This is me with Dave Stewart from Eurythmics. I'm going to wind quickly forward to the 90s, where I got all of these things. And then you guys might remember this. Anybody remember it? Anybody made out with somebody for the first time while this was on? So the guy behind those glasses is still that same kid, still awkward and music, you know, tough time. So winding forward now to the 2000s, I was at the Singularity exec program in 2011. And I had a bit of an epiphany. The question they ask you is, how can I positively impact the lives of 1 billion people? And I was like, you know, how can I do that? What can I do to make people have a better life? What can I do to actually do this? And that's when I had the forehead-slapping moment that music has been helping people focus and concentrate for millennia. This is a Mongolian shaman, Tuvan shaman. And this is one of the sounds they use to help people get into a flow state. It's exactly the same as didgeridoos, right? Or Gregorian chants. This is something that humans have been doing for a long time. Or even drum circles at Burning Man, right? Same thing, we're all getting into them. So I want to talk a little bit about your auditory attention. So your ears, they work in 360 degrees, unlike your visual attention. Your visual attention, if I put my hand in front of my face like this, I can't see you. If I'm in the jungle and I'm behind a tree, I'm going to use my ears to figure out what's going on. Now, our best friend, he knows this. Your dogs know the master of your attention is your hearing. And in fact, your dogs bark at you to have them do stuff, unless you've got a very annoying little dog that jumps on you like this all the time, right? Same with cell phones. Now, cell phones don't flash, they ring so that you can find them in a nice, tidy desk. Anybody else got a desk like that? And when you're driving, right? When you're driving, you better be glad that you've got your auditory attention so you know where to look. So when you're working, there are two types of attention that really matter. One of them is this thing called your endogenous attention. This is your attention on the thing you're doing. You're sitting there. These are your goals, your flow state. This is the persistence, actually being able to deliver something. At the same time, you have another type of your attention called the exogenous attention. This is your hypervigilance. This is your hearing in 360 degrees that's behind you. And what you want to do when you're working is to increase your endogenous attention and reduce your exogenous attention. And the thing that I'm most proud of in my career is, again, through conversations at Singularity going, you know what? I think we can tune this. I think we can create this thing that I've called streamlined music. So streamlined music is music that's designed to increase your endogenous attention and decrease your exogenous attention. And it works pretty well. We're going to give you some examples in a minute of what this actually sounds like. And I've kind of contrasted it against messy music. Has anybody tried to put on, say, Snoop Dogg or the Stones or the Beatles and work? You're going to be typing, it's a hard day's night. You can't do it. Messy music. So what I want to do is introduce you to a colleague, dear friend of mine, and science director from Focus at Will, my company, who's going to come on stage, and we're going to do a live cognitive science test. You've all got a little card there, right? We're going to do some live cognitive science. We're going to show you how to be more creative and tell you a little bit about which kinds of music work best for you. So I want to introduce Dr. Julia Mossbridge up on stage. There you go, Julia. I'm going to hand you over.
So thanks for getting out your cards. Before we use them, I'm going to pump you up with a little bit of science, and then we'll get to the experiment. So I'm super excited to talk about focus because when I was a kid, I had actually a ridiculous amount of focus. No one could even interrupt me when I was working. And the people around me, however, I noticed didn't have as much focus, and it turned out it was a problem. So it turns out that if you actually just ask people whether they feel more focused when they're listening to what Will just called streamlined music versus when they're listening to music of their own choice. In 2 experiments, we showed that, in fact, people, yes, at the top of the scale here, the blue dots, these are the averages from people who were listening to streamlined music and they felt more focused versus the messy music on the bottom. But you shouldn't, I don't know if you've ever talked to a human being and asked them what's going on for them, but if you do that, you would realize people don't know very well what's going on with them. And so what you have to do as a cognitive scientist is you find some objective measure. So they might say they're focused, but in fact, we had the same people run a test of logical thinking. And it turns out it directly correlated with these focus measures. So they were doing better on the test of logical thinking when they were more focused. Now that's very important. The other piece that I'm fascinated by is that when you have people do a task that tests their task persistence, so you take an exogenous cue from the outside, a flashing light that tells them now it's time to change the task, and then you see how well they switch tasks. When people are listening to streamlined music, they don't want to switch tasks. They want to stay on the task they were doing. They're good at that task, and they want to stay on it. It's like if a notification came, they would ignore it and do their work. Messy music, the opposite. Okay? So that's fascinating. But this is something that blew my mind. So we kind of suspected the others, and this is something new. There's something called a forward practice effect. This essentially means that if you practice something, you will get better at it, right? So for example, if you learn 48 words and you practice a randomly selected 24 of them, and then you take a test on all the 48 words, a recognition test, was this in the list or not, the results are that you're better on the words you were trained on, right? We generally know that this is true. So at the top of this slide, I've got a picture of the word past with an arrow going towards, because the direction is what we're normally used to in terms of our experience of time. So what if you take steps 2 and 3, the practice and the test, and you flip them in time? If you did that, you would learn the 48 words, you would take a test on all the 48 words, you would practice 24 of them, and what if the results were that you were better on the trained words, even though you were trained on them after you took the test? Okay? This is, how do you say in the business world, disruptive. Because it turns out that the future would be influencing the present, right? Okay, so we did that. And what we found is when people are listening to streamlined music, so those are the blue symbols, on the left-hand side, we have the memory for the words that are going to be trained in the future. Higher is better memory. And on the right, we have the words that are not going to be trained in the future. So lower is worse memory. So when they're listening to streamlined music, there's a significant difference between those. They're drawing the information from the future, assuming this is replicated. The red symbols are for people listening to messy music. They don't have this effect. What I'd like to say is that this is actually a replication of an experiment that was done at Cornell with also streamlined music. And in fact, I've been working for 10 years in this area, and it turns out that the characteristics of these data match the other kind of data that I've seen. So although I don't want to say, in the next few years we're going to have precogs sitting in some soup and telling us about future crimes people are going to commit, there's another part of me that says in the next few years we're going to have precogs sitting in some soup and telling us about future crimes we're going to commit. So a thought for later, and if you have any questions, I can talk with you afterwards. But What about creativity? As you have already heard, there's a creativity drain in this country. So kids are having a really hard time thinking outside the box. And what can we do with music to help them? Anything? And that's the experiment I wanted to do with you here. So like a good cognitive psychologist, I'm going to first ask you to do something, and I'm not going to tell you why I'm asking you to do it until afterwards. So we're going to do an old-fashioned type of experiment here. First, I'm going to ask you to rate yourself on the big 5. So get your card out, and you'll see OCEAN, ocean, at the top of your card. Okay? So this is just a rate yourself task. These are 5 independent personality traits that generally describe human beings. So give yourself a 1 to 5 for each trait. So for the O, openness, give yourself a 1 if you're extremely cautious. Give yourself a 3 if you're sort of in between, and give yourself a 5 if you're incredibly curious. For instance, if when you heard the data about looking into the future, you were like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting, we could do that and that with that, give yourself a 5. Okay, conscientiousness, C. Give yourself a 1 if you're easygoing, you're not too worried about things, you figure things will fall into place. Give yourself a 5 if you're super efficient and concerned about how the way things are going to fall into place. And a 3 if you're in between. Extroversion, E. Give yourself a 1 if you're really solitary and you prefer being alone. Give yourself a 5 if you're incredibly outgoing and you just can't wait to go to the next party. A for agreeableness. Give yourself a 1 if you're basically kind of detached and you don't really worry about what other people think. Give yourself a 5 if you're super friendly and you really want to make sure people are happy with you. And then neuroticism. Give yourself a 1 if you're just super confident. And give yourself a 5, or someplace in between. Give yourself a 5 if you're incredibly nervous. Okay? So now that you have yourself rated, we're going to do the other part of the experiment, and I'll tell you how this all makes sense in a minute. Thanks for playing along. Okay, so get your card out, if you have your card out, get your pencil and get ready to be creative. What I'm going to ask you to do is do a standard creativity task called an alternative uses task that was invented by Torrance in the 70s. And it asks you to write all the alternative uses that are the most creative uses you can think of for mundane objects, okay? While you're doing this task, I'm going to play some music for you in the background. Just ignore the music and do the task. The task will last about 1.5 minutes. And the task is to write down as many alternative uses you can think of for a toilet paper roll. So for example, putting toilet paper around it is the least creative thing you could think of, right? If you want to split it down the middle and make like a skate park for your gerbil, that's really creative. So those are just 2 examples. I'm going to go ahead and press the music button and go for it. Ready? Go. Great, okay, lift up your pens, no cheating. And we're going to do it again with a different kind of music. We're going to do it again, this time with a 2-liter bottle. Filling it up with pop would be the least creative. Making it into cutting it in half and making it into a piggy bank might be more creative. Are you ready? Here we go. All right, go ahead and lift up your pens. And now I'd like you to swap your card with a neighbor. So choose someone around you, hand them your card, they'll give you their card, and you're going to judge their creativity. Yes. So.
All right.
So, folks. All right. So what we're going to do, everyone, yes. Isn't this interesting? Everyone wants to apologize for what they wrote, right? So the other person needs to look at it and honestly rank, put a star above the group of purposes that you think has the highest quality. Please ignore quantity. So something could have 10 lists of the 2-liter bottle. You don't care. Put a star above that has the highest quality of creative thinking, whether it's the 2-liter bottle or the toilet paper roll. Do that now. Don't apologize for what your thoughts were.
A big star.
Just put a star.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Okay, wonderful. Yes.
All right.
Yes. That was great. So I'm going to go ahead and show you. Hand it back to the original person, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you when we did this in a scientific way that was more controlled in terms of controlling for order, etc. What we actually found. So, and we'll see if this compares to what you found. What we actually found is that when people were listening to streamlined music, the independently judged quality of their creative thinking was significantly higher than the messy music. In fact, the difference was extremely large compared to many studies that are already published about creative thinking. We were kind of stunned because just by playing music, you can actually influence the quality of what people are thinking about. Now, the reason I had you do the OCEAN, the Ocean Personality Type scoring of yourself, is because the other result blew us away even more. The other result is that people who have low openness, which we already know generally rank lower on quality of creative thinking, based on previous work, had the biggest effect. They were the ones who were pulling this. So people who had low openness, you can see on the left, had a big leap between the red, which is messy music. These are the same people listening to the two kinds of music, and the blue, which is streamlined music.
Julia, perhaps we could just ask anybody, did you guys figure out which was the messy music?
Yeah.
Right?
You knew which was the messy music. Yeah.
The first set of music was
it was designed to get your attention. It is good art, but it's not good for focusing.
Right.
So this is a manipulation that, for instance, engineers, who are traditionally of low openness, could use to actually become more creative, and it's the most scalable thing that I can think of. And it has no side effects. So I'd just like to say that overall, what's fascinating to me about streamlined music is it improves cognitive performance, gives people better focus, produces greater task persistence, reducing exogenous cueing, potentially gives us access to future information, which is the disruptive piece that we're going to be continuing to look at, and promotes higher quality creative thinking even among people who generally aren't usually very creative. So if you have any questions, please let us know.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody.